I never thought I'd find myself feeling like an outcast at a luxury resort in Miami Beach, especially not one where I was footing the bill. But here I am, 3 days into what should have been a heartwarming family vacation, watching it turn into an emotional nightmare thanks to my sister-in-law, Sarah. My name is David, and I've been married to Emma for just over a decade now. We're both 45, successful in our careers, and have built a comfortable life together. No kids by choice, which gives us the freedom to travel whenever we want. And travel we do, at least 3 major vacations every year, plus weekend getaways to break up our hectic work schedules. This particular trip was supposed to be special. Emma's parents, Robert, 74, and Patricia, 68, had mentioned wanting to visit Miami one last time. The way Robert's voice softened when he talked about it, this was the city where he and Patricia had honeymooned nearly 5 decades ago. His health hasn't been great lately, and something in his tone suggested he worried this might be his final chance to revisit those precious memories. When Robert tried to contribute to the expenses, knowing how costly a week in Miami would be, I shut that down immediately. These people have been more like real parents to me than in-laws over the past decade. My financial situation is comfortable enough that I could easily cover a luxury vacation for 4, and seeing the joy in Robert's eyes when we landed was worth every penny. Then Sarah happened. At 35, Sarah's life couldn't be more different from ours. 3 school-age kids, a husband struggling to make ends meet, and a constant stream of comments on our vacation photos about how she hadn't had a proper holiday since her honeymoon. When she approached us about joining the Miami trip, I knew I'd be covering her expenses too, but hey, family helps family, right? I should have known something was off from the moment we checked into the beachfront resort. Sarah immediately started orchestrating what would become the theme of our entire vacation, my systematic exclusion from every family moment. It started innocently enough. Standing in front of the stunning ocean view, Sarah suggested taking a family photo. As I reached for my phone to set the timer, she stopped me. "Oh, can you take the picture for us? We want just the 4 of us, Mom, Dad, Emma and me, Dot." The words hit like a punch to the gut, but I told myself it was just one photo. Maybe they wanted a picture of their original family unit. I could understand that. But it wasn't just one photo. It became a pattern, a calculated campaign of exclusion that would make the next few days feel like psychological warfare. Dot, just the 4 of us. Dot, this one's just for family. Dot, we want a siblings photo. Dot, over and over. I found myself relegated to the role of designated photographer, watching through a lens as my wife and her family created memories without me. Sarah would post these photos on social media, crafting a narrative where I simply didn't exist in this family vacation, a vacation I was paying for. Emma would occasionally try to intervene, insisting I join them, and Robert and Patricia would invite me into photos. But Sarah always managed to manipulate the situation until I was back behind the camera. With each passing hour, I felt less like a family member and more like a walking ATM with photography skills. Little did I know this was just the beginning. Sarah's campaign of exclusion would escalate in ways I couldn't have imagined, testing not only my patience but also my marriage and the very definition of family loyalty. The pool incident was what really made me realize how calculated Sarah's behavior was. After a long day of sightseeing in Miami's sweltering heat, I was looking forward to cooling off in the resort's pristine infinity pool. The view was breathtaking, crystal clear water seeming to merge with the endless ocean horizon. Perfect for some family relaxation time, or so I thought. Just as I was about to step into the water, Sarah's voice cut through the peaceful atmosphere. "David, could you stay out for a bit? We want to get some girls' photos, just Emma, Mum and me. Dot." What started as one innocent request turned into an hour-long photo shoot. First, it was the women, then a siblings photo, then another original family shot. Each time I tried to join them, Sarah would conjure up another combination that conveniently excluded me. I stood there at the poolside, feeling like a hired photographer at someone else's vacation, watching my wife laugh and splash around with her family, while I couldn't even enjoy the pool I was paying for. The boat tour the next day was even more blatant. We'd booked a scenic coastal cruise, and the boats were designed with 2 rows of 2 seats each, perfect for families of 4. Before anyone could suggest taking turns or finding a fair solution, Sarah jumped into action with military precision. "Mum and Dad should sit together in the front row," she announced, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Then, without missing a beat, she claimed the spot next to Emma in the second row. "This will be perfect for family photos." I ended up alone in the next boat, wedged between a honeymooning couple and an elderly tourist who spent the entire ride telling me about her cats. Meanwhile, Sarah was busy orchestrating the perfect family photos in the lead boat. That souvenir photo now sits proudly on her social media feed, 4 smiling faces enjoying a perfect family moment, while I'm nowhere to be seen. But the dinner at Ocean's Edge really took the cake. I'd spent weeks securing a reservation at this exclusive waterfront restaurant, specifically requesting a prime table with an unobstructed view of the sunset. It was supposed to be romantic, Emma and I sharing the golden hour while her parents enjoyed the view across from us. Sarah could have easily taken one of the side seats, being the last-minute addition to our trip. Instead, before anyone could even pull out a chair, Sarah planted herself next to Emma, while Robert and Patricia naturally took the prime viewing spots. I found myself stuck with the worst seat in the house, wedged between the busy service station and Robert, my back to the sunset I'd planned the entire evening around. When Emma tried to suggest we rearrange the seating, Sarah showed her true colours. "Stop being so clingy, Emma," she snapped. "This is a family vacation, remember? The dinner conversation was just as exclusionary. Every time I tried to participate, Sarah would steer the discussion toward childhood memories, high school adventures, and family inside jokes, topics that obviously left me out. Even when Emma and her parents attempted to include me by explaining the context or connecting stories to current events, Sarah would immediately interrupt and redirect the conversation. She built an impenetrable wall of shared history that left me feeling like an outsider looking in at my own dinner table. By the time dessert arrived, I'd given up trying to participate in the conversation. I sat there picking at my $200 Wagyu steak, wondering how I'd become such a pushover. That night, lying in our hotel room, I tried to talk to Emma about it. While she acknowledged my feelings, her response left me even more confused. "You have to understand, David," she said softly. "Our childhood was different. Dad was in the military, deployed more often than not. We rarely had proper family vacations. Now, with his health declining, Sarah's probably just trying to recreate those missing family moments." I stared at the ceiling, listening to the distant sound of waves crashing on the beach. Was I being oversensitive? Was it wrong to expect inclusion just because I was funding the trip? The fact that I was even questioning my right to feel hurt showed how deeply Sarah's behaviour had affected me. Little did I know the spa day tomorrow would push me to my breaking point, leading to a confrontation that would change the dynamics of our entire family. The spa day was meant to be the crown jewel of our Miami trip. I'd meticulously arranged private suites at the resort's luxury spa, one for Emma and me, another for her parents, and a solo room for Sarah. The treatments I'd booked weren't cheap. Hot stone massages, couples aromatherapy, and those fancy gold-infused facials that cost more than a decent dinner. When Robert wasn't feeling well that morning and decided to stay back at the beach, I thought we could still salvage the day. But Sarah, ever the opportunist, saw another chance to push me out. "David, why don't you keep Dad company?" she suggested, with that saccharine smile I'd grown to detest. "We need a girls' day at the spa. You understand, right?" The manipulation was obvious, using Robert's condition as leverage to make me look selfish if I protested. But sometimes life has a way of turning lemons into lemonade. That afternoon with Robert turned out to be the most genuine moment of the entire vacation. Sitting there on the beach, watching the waves roll in, Robert opened up in a way he never had before. He told me stories about his military service, about falling in love with Patricia, and about raising his girls. There was wisdom in his words, a lifetime of experience shared between 2 men who had both married into the same family story at different chapters. I wanted to tell him about Sarah's behaviour to unburden myself of the frustration that had been building all week. But watching him there, content in the sea breeze, sharing his memories with such peace, I couldn't bring myself to shatter that moment with family drama. That night, I finally reached my breaking point. Emma and I were alone in our room, and I couldn't hold it in anymore. Your sister has spent this entire vacation treating me like an unwanted intruder, I said, pacing the room. And you've barely said a word about it. Emma sat on the edge of the bed, her face a mixture of concern and resignation. I know Sarah can be difficult, she admitted, but confronting her would only create drama. This might be Dad's last big family trip, David. Can't we just keep the peace? Her words hit me like a bucket of ice water. Once again, I was expected to swallow my feelings for the sake of family harmony. Something inside me snapped. If Sarah wanted to pretend I wasn't part of the family, maybe it was time to show her exactly what that meant. I lay awake most of the night, forming a plan. Sarah had spent the entire vacation enjoying luxury accommodations, premium services, and exclusive experiences, all while treating me like nothing more than a walking ATM. She seemed to have forgotten that every indulgent moment, every spa treatment, and every poolside cocktail was happening on my dime. The next morning, our last day in Miami, I set things in motion. I casually suggested to Emma that she take her parents to the airport ahead of us, claiming Sarah and I would follow later. Emma saw right through me instantly. I know what you're planning, she said quietly. Do you? I replied, meeting her gaze. Then you can stay neutral, just like you have all week. Her slight nod was all the acknowledgement I needed. After a week of watching her sister systematically exclude me from every family moment, Emma seemed willing to let karma take its course. As I watched them drive away, Sarah still blissfully unaware upstairs in her room, I felt a strange calm settle over me. I wasn't being petty or seeking revenge. I was simply allowing natural consequences to unfold. Sarah had made her choices all week long. Now it was time for her to face them. Walking to the front desk, I couldn't help but smile. The next hour would teach Sarah a lesson about family, respect, and the true cost of treating people like ATMs. And I had a feeling it would be a lesson she wouldn't soon forget. At the front desk, I put my plan into motion. The hotel's billing system worked perfectly for what I had in mind. While room rates had been prepaid, all additional charges accumulated during the stay were settled at checkout. This included every room service order, every spa treatment, and every poolside cocktail that Sarah had freely enjoyed, assuming I'd cover it all. I need to separate the bills by suite, I told the manager, spinning a story about tax purposes. He didn't even blink. It was apparently a common enough request at a luxury resort. As I watched him process the separation, I couldn't help but think about how Sarah had never once considered the cost of her actions, emotional or financial. That was about to change. After settling the bills for my room and my in-laws' suite, I waited for the moment of truth. Emma and her parents were already on their way to the airport. They needed extra time due to Robert's mobility issues and wheelchair arrangements. That left just Sarah and me in the hotel lobby when the manager called her down to settle her account. The colour drained from Sarah's face as she stared at the itemised bill. The total was staggering, probably several months of her usual household expenses. Her eyes darted between the bill and my face, confusion turning to panic as reality set in. You quote, "You're not covering mine?" Her voice trembled slightly. I maintained my composure. "I've already paid for my family. Sarah fumbled with her credit card, her hand shaking as she handed it to the manager. The declined message that flashed on the terminal only confirmed what I already suspected. She'd spent the entire week living far beyond her means, secure in her assumption that I would foot the bill. The manager swiped her card again, but the result was the same. Her credit limit wasn't even close to covering half of what she owed. All those girls-only spa days and exclusive dinners had finally caught up with her, and this time her designated ATM wasn't coming to the rescue. The next 30 minutes in that hotel lobby were pure theatre. Sarah paced back and forth, trying to figure out how to handle this unexpected crisis. Every few minutes she'd throw desperate glances my way, clearly hoping I'd cave and offer to pay. But I kept my position on the lobby's plush couch, outwardly calm while savouring every second of her predicament. I knew I could end her ordeal with a simple swipe of my card, and I would have if she'd simply apologised for her behaviour during the trip. But Sarah's pride wouldn't let her take that step. Instead, she wanted me to volunteer to help, as if she was entitled to my money even after a week of treating me like an unwanted intruder. Finally, she made the call she'd been avoiding. I could hear her husband Mark's voice rising through the phone as she explained the situation. The bill she'd racked up amounted to nearly his entire monthly salary. His questions grew increasingly heated. How could she spend so recklessly? What was she thinking? After what felt like an eternity of awkward negotiations and probably some desperate promises on her part, the money was finally wired to cover the bill. But Sarah's troubles were far from over. As we arrived at the airport, already cutting it close to departure time, she discovered I hadn't completed her flight check-in. While I breezed through priority check-in, she was left standing in the regular line, juggling her luggage and growing increasingly agitated as she watched the minutes tick by. The final blow came at the gate. I had quietly arranged business class upgrades for myself, Emma, and her parents, a nice surprise to end their trip comfortably. Sarah, however, remained in her original economy seat. The look on her face as she trudged past our spacious business class seats told the whole story. She didn't say a word, but her clenched jaw and rigid posture spoke volumes. For the entire flight, she sat stewing in economy while we enjoyed premium service up front. I couldn't help but appreciate the poetry of it all. After a week of excluding me from every family moment, Sarah was finally experiencing what it felt like to be the one left out. The moment we landed, Sarah's composure finally shattered. She practically sprinted to her parents at baggage claim, tears streaming down her face as she launched into her version of events. According to her dramatic retelling, I had cruelly abandoned her at the hotel, subjected her to public humiliation, and deliberately excluded her from the flight upgrades. She conveniently left out the part about her week-long campaign to exclude me from every family moment. Robert, already exhausted from the journey, became visibly distressed as she continued her performance. Even in this moment, she showed no concern for his health, too focused on painting herself as the victim of my supposed cruelty. I maintained my composure through Sarah's display, waiting for the right moment to present my side. When I finally spoke, I methodically laid out how she had systematically excluded me from every family moment during a vacation I had funded. Each family-only photo, every manipulated seating arrangement, all the deliberately exclusive conversations. I laid them out one by one. The simple logic was clear. If she didn't consider me family enough to include in the memories, why should she expect me to cover her expenses as family? Her performance came to an abrupt halt when Patricia intervened. After a week of watching her daughter's behaviour, Emma's mum had reached her limit. Sarah, enough, she said firmly. We don't want to get involved, but we saw how you cornered him the whole time. We pushed him to include him, but you had your own plans to sideline him. Now deal with it. But instead of accepting responsibility, Sarah lashed out more viciously. Her true colours emerged as she accused me of using money to control the family. Then she turned to Emma, her voice dripping with venom. You sided with your husband to humiliate your sister, your own blood, she spat. You'll see what this man is going to do to you. He's going to cheat on you right under your nose, and you won't be able to do anything. You're blinded by his money. The baseless accusation sparked a fierce response from Emma, turning the baggage claim area into a scene from a soap opera. The situation might have escalated further if not for Robert. Throughout the trip, he had maintained a dignified silence, observing everything but saying, "Little Sarah," he said, his voice quiet but firm. Your brother-in-law has done enough for you. If you can't appreciate it, better keep your mouth shut. The simple statement effectively ended Sarah's tirade, though the damage to family relationships was already done. After Robert's final words, a heavy silence fell over the airport terminal. His request to leave immediately was filled with quiet authority, and I quickly helped him to the car. We drove away, leaving Sarah standing there alone, her pride preventing her from asking for a ride despite being 70 miles from home. She hadn't brought her own car to the airport, having arrived with us, and I knew the taxi fare would be astronomical. But after a week of her deliberate exclusion, I couldn't find it in myself to care. The drive to my in-laws' house was peaceful. When we arrived, both of them expressed genuine gratitude for the vacation. Robert's hug lasted longer than usual, communicating more than words ever could. That hug validated everything. Emma and I returned home and initially avoided discussing what had happened, falling back into our normal routines. The topic remained untouched until a few days later, when Emma finally broke the silence. She shared that Sarah was facing serious financial consequences. Mark, furious about having to bail her out, was demanding full repayment and refused to save her pompous butt, as he put it. This left Sarah struggling to manage both the repayment and her regular credit card bills. While Emma supported my actions, she gently suggested I might have gone too far. But even as she said it, she acknowledged that her sister had needed this wake-up call. Sarah had spent years taking advantage of others' generosity while treating them with contempt. The fact that she was finally facing consequences for her actions felt like long overdue justice. When Emma asked if I regretted my decisions, I could honestly say no. Sometimes the most effective lessons come with the highest price tags, and Sarah had chosen her own tuition through her behaviour. 3 months later, as Thanksgiving approached, the ripple effects of our Miami trip were still sending shockwaves through the family. Patricia had been planning an extra special celebration, knowing it might be one of the last holidays with Robert given his declining health. But Sarah and Mark's absence was the elephant in the room that no one wanted to discuss. Mark's official reason for declining was that he couldn't bear to sit at the same table as someone who would humiliate a financially weaker person. That's when Patricia finally reached her breaking point. She invited Mark over alone one afternoon and revealed the full story of Sarah's behavior during the Miami trip. "Look at the vacation photos," she told him, pulling up Sarah's social media posts. "Really look at them. The evidence was right there in Sarah's own carefully curated posts. Photo after photo where I had been deliberately excluded, pushed behind the camera, or made to sit apart. The visual record of my systematic exclusion was impossible to deny." Patricia explained how she and Robert had repeatedly tried to include me, only to watch Sarah create new ways to push me aside. What made this especially painful was that Mark and I had always had a decent relationship. We weren't close friends, but our interactions at family gatherings had always been pleasant and respectful. I had never looked down on him for his financial situation. Such thoughts had never even crossed my mind. We were just two men who had married into the same family, trying our best to support our wives and contribute what we could. The fact that Sarah had manipulated him into seeing me as some kind of classist villain showed just how far she would go to avoid taking responsibility for her actions. Despite my reservations about attending Thanksgiving dinner after everything that had happened, I went for Robert's sake. Sarah and Mark's absence was explained away with a convenient story about visiting his parents. It wasn't until after Robert retired for the evening that the real story emerged, and it was far uglier than I had imagined. The Miami incident had apparently been the catalyst for major upheaval in Sarah's marriage. Rather than learning humility from the experience, she had turned her humiliation into ammunition against Mark, constantly degrading him for his income level. She began demanding that he take on a second job on top of his full-time position, despite the fact that she herself only worked part-time, a mere 20 hours a week. When Mark agreed to look for additional work, it came with a reasonable condition. He would need to step back from household duties and childcare. This compromise sent Sarah into a fury. Patricia shared how Mark had broken down while telling her everything. The expectations being placed on him were staggering. Sarah wanted him to work well over 60 hours a week while still maintaining his share of domestic responsibilities, all while she maintained her leisurely schedule. The entitled attitude that had been so evident during our Miami vacation was apparently just the tip of the iceberg. The woman who had spent a week racking up expenses she couldn't pay was now berating her hard-working husband for not providing her with a more luxurious lifestyle. Patricia had tried everything to make Sarah see reason. She counselled her daughter, defended her son-in-law, and attempted to make Sarah understand the unreasonableness of her demands. But it seemed the taste of luxury during our Miami trip had awakened something dangerous in Sarah. The woman who once claimed to be content with simple family vacations was now obsessed with living a lifestyle she hadn't earned. The situation became so concerning that Patricia finally had to deliver a harsh ultimatum. She told Sarah point blank that if her behaviour led to divorce, she shouldn't expect any support from the family. More importantly, she was warned to keep any marriage troubles away from Robert. His health couldn't handle the stress of watching his daughter's marriage implode over her newfound materialism. On our drive home from Thanksgiving dinner, Emma and I reflected on how our well-intentioned invitation had backfired. I remembered a quote I'd seen displayed at the Miami resort. "Once you experience the luxury of a private beach, you'll never set foot on a public beach the same way." The same principle seemed to apply to someone who'd experienced business class after years of economy. There was no going back. We had inadvertently given Sarah a glimpse of a lifestyle she couldn't sustain, and now her marriage was paying the price. The whole situation left me feeling guilty, not for making her pay her own bills, but for exposing her to a standard of living that had corrupted her perspective so completely. Mark, a decent man who worked hard to provide for his family, was now being punished for not being able to maintain the luxury she had briefly tasted. "Do you think she'll ever change?" Emma asked quietly as we pulled into our driveway. I thought about it for a moment. Sometimes people have to hit rock bottom before they can start climbing back up. As we walked into our home, I couldn't help but wonder if the price of teaching Sarah a lesson about respect and family had been worth the cost to everyone else involved. But then I remembered Robert's hug at the airport, Patricia's quiet approval, and Emma's newfound strength in standing up to her sister's manipulation. Sometimes, I realised, the hardest lessons are the ones most worth teaching, even if the tuition comes due in unexpected ways. Story 2. Something incredibly distressing occurred when I was 19. With one of my dad's close friends, my mum cheated on him. The fact that my dad and this guy were around the same age added to the misery of the situation. My dad had a really difficult time because of this treachery. Because it was a double blow, he was devastated. He was deceived by both his wife and his close friend, Dot. He was severely affected, and he subsequently battled depression and trust difficulties for a considerable amount of time. My dad was so offended that he kind of cut himself apart from everyone and stopped going out with his buddies. I remained close to my dad and supported him during that difficult period. Fortunately, he began to improve with therapy after we sought expert assistance, and he is currently doing well. However, after all that transpired the last time I spoke with my mother, I informed her that I was done with her and that I no longer wanted to interact with her. I haven't spoken to her in around 8 years. My mum ended up marrying my dad's friend, the same person she had an affair with, which further exacerbated matters. Indeed, she even sent me an invitation to their wedding, which, considering everything that had transpired previously, I felt was both daring and unpleasant. My mother has contacted me once more after all these years. I still haven't made up my mind about it. There is a lot to consider, particularly in light of the events that transpired and the impact they had on my father. I haven't wanted to speak to my mum since the whole scandal with her cheating on my dad, which completely upended our lives. My dad and I went through an extremely difficult period, and to be honest, thinking about it now makes me feel a lot of negative emotions. I blocked her phone number and even her Facebook page a while ago. I also blocked her spouse. I unexpectedly received a letter from her in the mail one day. At first, I wanted to simply tear it up and throw it in the garbage. Well, why even bother? However, for some reason, I stopped and chose to open it to read what she had written in her letter. According to my mother, she truly misses being a part of my life and is deeply remorseful for the suffering she inflicted on me through my dad. She said that she had made a few attempts over the years to contact me to discuss all that had happened, to apologize or to clarify things, but she was unable to do so because I had blocked her. She was now requesting that I visit her home so we could speak, only the two of us. Her husband would not be present, She made plain dot, she and I would be alone. She gave the impression that she genuinely wanted to put things right, or at the very least, provide her version of events. I'm stranded and not really sure what to do next. On the one hand, she did cause us a great deal of suffering, and it has been a long time. However, there may be a component of the tale that I am unaware of, or perhaps, just possibly, there is an opportunity to make things right. It's a lot to ponder, particularly in light of how difficult and painful the past was. A part of me wants to continue being obstinate, as I have for the past 8 years, acting as though my mother doesn't exist, but I'm genuinely lost on what to do next. I should also mention that my dad has never spoken negatively of her in all of this. Despite his intense pain, he never made an effort to paint her in a negative light for me. Rather, he experienced depression, lost faith in friends, and stopped having faith in others in general. There was more to the affair than a fleeting lapse. Both my mum and his buddy were lying to my dad, and it went on for years right in front of him. My dad started to open up and recover after undergoing some rigorous therapy. However, I took a different route. In order to survive and move on, I entirely shut my mum out of my life. We never actually talked about anything that happened, but now she's contacted out and wants to discuss, so I'm thinking about meeting up with her. I never offered her an opportunity to clarify herself, and I must admit that I'm only interested in hearing her thoughts. It is strange. I can't decide, so I'm just kicking about some ideas. A part of me wants to retain the distance in order to continue protecting myself from further suffering. However, I'm also wondering whether she needs to say something significant that may alter my feelings. I simply don't know what to do, and it's a difficult decision. Before the upgrade, a few remarks are needed. It's a difficult circumstance. I'm sorry about what happened to you and your father. I would give it careful thought before making any judgments if I were you. I would make an effort to weigh the advantages and disadvantages of this possible encounter with your mother. Perhaps she has realized what she did. You don't have to forgive her, though. The ball is in the court of New York. Go ahead and meet her if you'd like to speak with her. It's okay if you don't, though. She is not owed anything by you. Even though she was your mother, it makes sense given what you've been through. The best remark is this one. You are not required to pardon your mother. Additionally, you must act in your own best interests. But clinging to hatred is bad. You don't have to trust them, forgive them, or open your heart in order to let go of hate. However, you must ultimately make that decision. I quote, sorry you're in this situation at all. Give the choice some thought. When we are one, don't feel hurried. Your mother may wait patiently until you have clarity if she wants to get back in touch. It's doubtful that you could build much or any relationship with her on your own because she's remarried and still with a fair partner. It makes sense that she would also like to include a fair partner. Finally. Therefore, you might want to set clear limits there for as long as you feel safe doing so, if you want to meet and possibly get back in touch. Talking maturely with your father before making your own decision can also be a good option. Whatever you decide, he is completely aware, and everything is public knowledge. Don quote T, go to her house if you do end up meeting her. Follow your own terms. A location where you may leave if necessary and feel more at ease. The house she lives with the man she cheated with would probably be the final location for this conversation. You may become enraged by it. This is challenging. It is difficult to deal with the anguish she has given you and your father. I feel like you've shut the door on this whole thing. However, the issue is still, in a sense, just outside your door. I believe it would be beneficial for you to speak with your mother, although you said your father had therapy. Did you receive any yourself? How did you assist yourself? You may get some closure if you talk to your mother. At the end of it, you might be able to effectively close that chapter of your life. Though I'm not claiming you'll be embracing and singing joyful tunes, you're only ignoring your mother at the moment and your animosity remains entrenched. It's not healthy either. The choice is ultimately yours. Do it on your terms and because you want to. I hope the best for you. I'm a gloomy individual. I assume that your absence from her life has persisted. Reminders that her marriage was not the only thing she ruined. She will say or do everything, in my opinion, to re-enter your life. overly dramatic apologies, sincere apologies, expressing regret that she was deprived of so much of your life. Wanted to speak with you several times so that you would pardon her and she could sleep more easily. Making her feel better about what she did is not your job. Just because someone regrets that their actions have repercussions doesn't mean you have to forgive them. To be honest, in order to heal from what your mother did to you, I would think about seeing a therapist. I don't think your mother will be able to help. I watch her bullshit being repeated. I've done this before. At the age of 23, my dad cheated on my mother in 2001, after they had been together for 30 years. Before this, we were quite close. For the next 2 years, I didn't talk to him. Early in 2004, he contacted me to inform me that he had cancer and that he would really like to speak with me one more. I went to see him in the state where he had relocated after agreeing. 7 months after our reconciliation, he passed away in August 2004. Putting my anger aside and doing the hard thing made me joyful. Even though I loved him, I now recognize his flaws. I know how much sadness I would have had if Dad had passed away without us ever talking about it. But I have never truly forgiven him in my heart or mind. Hello, everyone. I had no idea my post would receive so much attention. I just wanted to give you guys some news since I made the decision to see my mum after reading a lot of your suggestions. I felt that a public setting would be more comfortable, so we decided to meet there. Fortunately, it was a pleasant day, so we decided to take a stroll in the park to resolve our differences. I was okay with her informing me in advance that her husband would be picking her up later. When we first met, I wasn't very bothered by it. She was not offering any justifications for what had transpired, which was among the first things I observed. She simply apologized over and over again. I was honest with her, telling her that I nearly skipped our meeting. I made it plain that I was there for my personal benefit, not hers. I have to do this in order to gain some insight or closure. Perhaps. She seems to understand that. We located a bench and sat down to continue our conversation. One of my main concerns was if my father had committed any wrongdoing, or whether his abuse in any way may have contributed to the events that transpired. Her response, however, was rather explicit. No, he hadn't. She confessed that the years of lying were not justified by the fact that she merely fell in love with someone else. Even though it was difficult, I felt a little lighter for having the talk, even if there was a lot to comprehend. I'm happy I went, but I'm still processing how I feel about it all. Even though it won't alter the past, it was crucial for me to hear her perspective. While we were talking at the park, as my mother proceeded to apologize, I found myself facing some intense emotions and memories. I shared my personal insights and experiences from those trying years. I recall telling her that you had deceived us. You also lied to me. Not only to Dad. I've begun to recall all of these minor incidents from my adolescence that didn't seem significant at the time but now seem so clear. Similar to her former friends' days. Now, when Dad was away, her spouse was at our house. I remember how kind you two were with one another. And I feel so stupid for not seeing the connection. Before. I never gave any of these little recollections much attention at the time, but now they all make a lot of sense. I also told her how those years had influenced my current perspective on that time in my life. I also shared with her the immense suffering that Dad endured. He never made any negative remarks about her or her spouse. In spite of everything, he battled despair to such an extent that I was actually afraid I may one day discover him dead, having committed suicide. He was forced to face these difficult realities with my mother after being betrayed by his wife and best friend, two of the most important individuals in his life. I gave her an explanation of why I had decided to stop communicating with her altogether. It was the correct thing to do, an essential action to safeguard my own support and well-being. My father. I needed her to realize that what she was doing affected not just him but also me. I needed to talk about these things that had been bothering me for so long. Even though it was a difficult topic. During our conversation, I made it quite apparent to her that I was the one who decided to break off contact. Dad didn't impact me. Considering everything, I felt compelled to do it for my own mental health. There was one major question. Why, after all these years, was she contacting me now? Now, what was it she wanted from me? Although her response was straightforward, it had many ramifications. She desired to re-enter my life. I had to provide a scathing response. While you were lying through your teeth for 5 years, you ought to have considered that. My affectionate recollections of her and my dad's buddy, who I considered to be almost like an uncle, were difficult for me to reconcile with the treachery they planned in front of us. Together, we had even gone fishing. He was involved in deceit and falsehoods while posing as his father's friend. How did you handle it for so many years? I questioned her in a somewhat rhetorical manner. She had no response to that. I spent a lot of our talk me expressing how disappointed and betrayed I felt. I informed her forcefully, but I made sure to give her space to voice her mind toward the conclusion of our conversation. Without you, I'm doing just great. I simply wanted to see you because I finally found the closure I sought. She made an effort to say that she sincerely apologized for everything that had transpired, not just for getting caught. She even said that she would stop at nothing to get in touch with me. I did, however, set down the one requirement that may potentially cause me to reconsider. Making a decision is the only thing that would ever convince me to have any interaction. That's all I said. Not going into detail, but stating unequivocally that I would never contemplate renewing our relationship until she made a major adjustment or show of goodwill. Eventually gave her the ultimatum that had been brewing for years after listening to her and expressing what I wanted to say. You've already decided. Stay with him and leave or get a divorce. Do not get in touch with me. However, you already made that decision, so I won't make you do it again. I wanted her to realize how much her choices affected not just her life, but also mine. I feel like I got what I came for, which was some closure, I said to her. You also desired to express your serenity. You have now, and I still don't think I want to communicate with you in any way. Just give me some space. You made a decision. I needed her to understand that although I wasn't upset, I also couldn't just return to my previous state of affairs. Too much had changed, and the damage was too great. But I felt like I was being colder and harsher than normal as I said those words. Anyone who knows me would tell you that I don't usually act like this. Despite everything, I could see that she was crying by the end of our talk. It was difficult to see her in that state. I just told her, go about your life. It was a difficult, emotional time when I had to face the complex emotions that accompany family and betrayal while simultaneously maintaining my boundaries. I had to deal with the mixture of relief and sadness that came from finally seeing everything that needed to be said while I looked for closure. I will live my life, I said as I concluded our conversation. However, you shouldn't be a part of mine. It was unambiguous and definitive. There was no embrace or handshake, just a simple departure from her and the circumstance. And to be honest, I think I made the right decision. My composure held throughout the whole meeting. There was no name-calling or shouting. Even though it was so difficult, I wanted to maintain my composure. It was painful to see my mother crying. It's not something I take lightly or am proud of causing. But it was essential for her to understand the full impact of her actions, not just in the past, but on our future relationship as well. I needed her to know clearly why I chose to cut contact, and to ensure she understood that this wasn't just a spontaneous decision, but one I had considered deeply for a long time. Despite the emotional difficulty of the moment, I feel lighter and ready to move on. Some might have expected a full meltdown if I ever confronted her, but the reality was calm. There were no dramatics. I had been prepared for this talk for years. In my brain, rehearsing what I would say, how I might react. Now she understands where I stand. Edit, I simply wanted to explain something crucial. My mom isn't banned on Facebook or on my phone anymore. If she has anything else she wants to say, I'm open to hearing. During our chat, I did throw a lot at her and it was really heated. Who knows, maybe one day I might feel all right with having some type of contact with her again. But for now, I don't feel ready for that. I need some time to analyze things and see how I feel as time goes on. In the second story, I struck my spouse in the face, and I'm finding it difficult to accept full responsibility. We were having a heated fight, the kind when the air seems strained and everyone's voice becomes louder. He abruptly moved too near to me, encroaching on my personal space, and shoved me with the top portion of his body. I was unprepared for this, and I almost stumbled and fell. I ordered him to stop and back off since I was so shaken up. But he simply repeated it without listening. I was no longer just standing there in ignorance of what was going on. Even though I was well aware, his violent behavior at the time made me feel angry and afraid. I punched him in response to something that clicked within of me. I never would have thought I'd do it. For me, it is completely inconsistent with who I am. However, there is more to this tale. I should note that this wasn't the first time he had behaved in this manner against me. I've had some really difficult situations in the past when I was gravely harmed by someone else. I'm currently at a loss on what to do next. For me, this is a completely new circumstance. And to be honest, the thought of it all is overwhelming. He was about to depart once things had mostly settled down, and he blamed me for everything. He claimed it would take a long time for him to forgive me, since he couldn't believe I had struck him. I hoped he would understand when I attempted to explain why I had behaved the way I had, but he just refused to listen. He claimed that my actions were far worse than anything he had done, which only served to further confuse matters. I now have to go through all of these emotions and decide what to do next. Anyone finds it too much to bear, particularly when they are still attempting to understand their feelings and responses under such a tense situation. Everything that has transpired feels tremendously difficult and complicated, and I'm having a lot of trouble with it. I admit that using violence isn't the appropriate course of action, but I also believe that the circumstances that led up to my response were important. Invading my personal space, pushing me, or calling me derogatory insults is unacceptable. Given my history of abuse, these behaviors make me feel threatened and may set off a protective response. Being regarded as though I am the abuser irritates me, when I thought I was reacting to a threat. It's challenging because it goes beyond just determining who did what first. It concerns a pattern of conduct that has left me feeling insecure. Because of the intersection between our present problems and my prior trauma, our relationship is tricky. In the past, he has shoved me, gotten in my face, and put me in danger. Although unfortunate, my response was a result of feeling cornered and had to protect myself. This explains part of the reasoning behind my punch, but it doesn't make it acceptable. I believe discussing these occurrences with an impartial person, such as a therapist or counselor, might be beneficial. They might assist me in resolving my trauma reactions, such as my PTSD's flashbacks and blackouts, and in identifying safer methods to deal with conflicts. Regarding whether I'm entirely incorrect, I don't believe that in a scenario this complex, it's about right or wrong. It's more about knowing my triggers, how I react to them, and how to better control them going forward. I also need to consider why I'm remaining in this relationship, and if it's safe and beneficial for my mental health. In light of my past, I might be able to determine what's best for me going ahead by giving this some thought. He used to shoulder the blame when things between us went extremely nasty. Not this time, though, especially not in the face. I've never been the one to strike first. But this time, I lost it because of the combination of my anxiety and worry, as well as my pain and rage at being mistreated by someone I love. I could have hit him harder, but I didn't. I want to emphasize that it wasn't a punch thrown out of sheer rage, not that it makes it acceptable. It was more a result of panic, a careless response to a terrifying situation. I've attempted to discuss this with him, describing my feelings and the circumstances that lead up to that point, but I'm currently being portrayed as the bad guy. It's difficult to determine if he's only manipulating my thoughts. Though he was acting aggressively, I can see why I reacted the way I did. However, he could be correct. I'm making a concerted effort to determine whether I'm entirely at fault here. They insist that I am, and I'm feeling the weight of it. I want to know if my actions were completely uncalled for, or if there is any insight to be gained from the insanity of our disagreement. The third story. When my brother and I were little, our grandmother handed us each an equal share portfolio. When they were worth a vehicle, brother sold his. They've grown to a significant amount since I left mine in. Now my part is wanted by my brother and his girlfriend. My grandmother put up a share portfolio for us when I was 4 years old and my brother was 16. It was moved to our own accounts as soon as we reached adulthood. Just 4 years later, my brother took a big financial hit and purchased a brand new Honda. Before it became mine, I was aware of mine for a lot longer than he was, and I saw it develop. Because I knew what it was. When I was given complete control, it was already worth a ludicrous amount since a large chunk of it was invested in Apple. I'm not sure if I should utilize the money that is locked up because my father instilled in me the belief that I should leave it to grow until I'm about 40. My brother and I don't communicate very much. I didn't actually grow up with him, and he has done some foolish things to the family over the years. So Dad is the only person I typically hear about his life. But according to an official letter I received from both of them, his new partner works in law, and the investments my grandma made were intended to benefit both of us. Not just me. Additionally, his was just about $15,000. The figure is accurate, but at the time he spent it, my value was simply that. They now want half of my worth, and his girlfriend has told me that if I don't allow them access, the penalties and legal expenses would take up my half, leaving me with nothing. The profits alone have rescued me a few times and sustain a significant portion of my life. I would have regressed years if half of that had vanished. Although it may come out as self-serving, I'm really accustomed to having the additional money support me when I've wished to relocate. I've chosen to live in 4 different states, and before I settle down, if I ever do, I want to travel and experience other places. How probable is it that they'll prevail and I'll have nothing? I'm aware that there was only my grandmother's word and no documentation. When my brother became 19, Mum created his accounts, but she also gave them to Dad at the same time. And 6 years ago, Dad gave me my part of the entire thing. All of the logins are with me. My name is on the trading and bank accounts, and I am the only owner of the shares. Should I look for a lawyer on my own? If so, what sort would I need? I've worked with my accountant for years, but it appears that this is a legal one issue rather than an accounting one. The news is mostly positive. I hired my own attorney and collaborated with my father. My shares chronology is incorrect, yet it still seems the same. My grandfather's portfolio originally included the items my brother and I received from our grandma. He was the astute one. After he passed away, my grandma took care of them, personally creating my brother's accounts and granting him authority over his portion. Before she passed away, she didn't do the same with my. Before she died, I believed she had already handed Dad power and set up the accounts for me. Rather, the shares were in her will, and she instructed my dad to inherit everything she had, which was about $15,000. When I was old enough to understand how to care for them, I would receive my brother's comparable portion. No trust existed. She simply had faith in my father. 6 years ago, my dad made the right decision by giving me authority and creating accounts for me. To give himself an advantage, my dad also contributed some of his own shares. After supporting my brother on several occasions over the years, Dad told me that he had finally had enough and had blasted him out when he approached him for money last year. Dad had used me as an example of how brothers should handle money, and my brother discovered that I still had my assets. My brother found out that way. Since my brother's girlfriend was merely a legal secretary, it won't come to the point where my lawyer finds out that I'm in the clear, but I still had shares and they had increased based on all that information. She worked for a firm that apologized and notified my lawyer, which is why I claim that. She was fired right away. A week after her termination, some of the contact details had been altered, and the letter I received from them had been altered to place her name higher than it should have been. When he came to see me, my brother begged for money. His girlfriend lost when she tried to con me out of money and is now deeply in debt. Rejecting my own brother repeatedly made me feel terrible, and I may have given him some money if he hadn't mentioned that his fiancée needed well into the 5 figures. I discovered that all of my tires had been cut the next morning. I no longer feel guilty. I've come to the realization that I don't know nearly enough about what I'm doing with the dividend shares and money in general after reading the other comments in the prior thread. Dad has helped me make a lot of decisions, and his counsel has worked out well so far, not because I knew it would, but rather because I didn't know what I was doing and trusted him. In order to maximize my resources, I have scheduled a meeting with a financial advisor. I appreciate all of your feedback. Story 3. Since I can remember, my entire family has had a strong interest in business, as if everyone had a business degree and has been employed in the industry for a very long time. The problem is that they never truly conducted their own job. Instead, they were constantly employed by someone else. It was therefore rather significant when I made the decision to change things up and launch my own company. I was taking a risk and doing something that none of them had ever done before. I wanted to turn my concept for a startup, something I was truly enthusiastic about, into a business. I was aware that I required assistance, particularly in locating investors who would provide funds to support the expansion of my project. I thus sought help from my relatives. I expressly requested my brother and uncle to do me a great favor. If they could locate investors for my startup, I would give them a stake in the business. To be honest, I had no idea how it would turn out, but I was pleasantly surprised when they found some incredible investors. And that was only the beginning. They didn't sit back and watch when they found investors. They were quite active, offering me guidance and ideas as well as invaluable assistance in starting the firm from the bottom up. Seeing them get so involved and having their support was fantastic. After a little while, all of that effort paid off handsomely. In a span of 2 years, my business exploded. It far exceeded my expectations in terms of success. Additionally, my family became even more involved as the business expanded. They became frequent visitors and spent a lot of time with me while I was at work. It was pretty amazing to watch something I started grow into a huge success and unite my family in a way we hadn't experienced before. This is where the situation becomes even more intriguing. Since I adore my family, I was ecstatic to see them become so invested in the company that they quit their own jobs to work with me. They truly are here to support and develop together, I thought. For a while, it was like winning the lottery to have people I really trust working with me. Everything appeared to be ideal. The disagreements I had with my brother also ceased. It seemed as though our tumultuous relationship had suddenly improved. All of this struck me as extremely positive. Considering that it was all because of the company I founded, I felt incredibly pleased and proud. The company seemed to be a magical force that was improving my life in all these positive ways. However, it turned out that things weren't quite as ideal as they appeared. While all these good vibes were happening, something else was brewing that I didn't see coming. My family, the ones I trusted the most, were about to shake things up in a way I never expected. Wow. Looking back, I realized I was completely off the mark. Reflecting on it now kind of stings because I was so caught up in worrying about all the wrong stuff. I put all my trust in my family, right? They had me so focused on watching my back with everyone else, my friends, my girlfriend, even my employees. They painted this picture where anyone outside the family circle was just out to get me to use me for whatever they could. It's wild because at the time I wasn't swimming in cash or anything. Yeah, I was doing all right for myself, but it's not like I was at a point where I felt like I had to guard my fortune from everyone around me. And to be honest, most of the individuals in my life were making decent money too, almost as much as I was. So the whole concept that they were all simply ready to take advantage of me seems so odd today. It feels like my family somehow managed to brainwash me into believing that only they could have my best interests at heart, which just wasn't the case. That moment of understanding hit me when things started to seem truly different. It was during the epidemic, a period that was harsh for everyone, that I began to see my family's genuine objectives. We were having these online meetings, right? And that's when they started pushing back on my ideas. Ideas that I had come up with that had truly helped our firm develop and prosper were now being questioned and disregarded. It was weird since these were the same beliefs that had taken us to where we were. But now all of a sudden they weren't good enough anymore. And as if it wasn't enough, my connection with my brother began to break apart too. After being so close, we suddenly stopped being so. The location where I used to feel comfortable and secure, somewhere I was proud and liked being, began to become a cause of worry I mean, I was supposed to be able to use my imagination and make things happen there. Instead, due of the stress and the bad feelings, it turned into a location that made me feel nervous and even gave me panic attacks. Everything I had created and cherished about my job seemed to be beginning to fall apart all around me. My family members owned almost as much of the company as I did, so it was a pretty difficult situation to be in. They cornered me in one of the most brutal ways possible by using their ownership share in the business. At a meeting discussing ways to reduce expenses because of the lockout, some employees were let go since they weren't needed. My name was mentioned. Yes, you heard correctly. On the table for negotiation was my own name. My uncle, whom I had essentially taught how this firm operates, said that because my brother was now in charge of the majority of the operations, it would only make sense for him to assume my responsibilities. What I was hearing was unbelievable. It like a nightmare. As if it wasn't startling enough, my father then added his voice. He advised me to accept a demotion or resign willingly. I was astounded. This betrayal was more than simply a professional one. It was intimate. They implied that I should be let go since they were the people I trusted the most in the world. The whole notion that, at the organization I dedicated my entire myself to, I may be viewed as disposable. It was weird and sad to create. It was a true stomach punch at that time. Watching my own family, who I believed loved and supported me, vote me out without a second thought left me stunned. The understanding hit hard and too late, yet it was like a light bulb moment. I thus decided to step down. I should have maintained my ground and fought harder, others might say, but I'm not like that. In such a poisonous atmosphere, I couldn't imagine myself surviving or even being somewhat happy. I had to go away from all that negativity, breathe and rebuild. I decided to try something new. It wasn't easy, but I launched a new endeavor. It pushed me to the edge, consumed years of my life and depleted my finances. To save money, I even had to shift residences. However, I persisted because I had faith in my work. Fortunately, all of that work paid off. My new company was operational by the time the globe was beginning to reopen following the shutdown. Although starting anew wasn't simple, I learned a lot about perseverance and the value of staying true to who I am. It was the start of a new chapter in my life, one in which I would be in charge and able to create something constructive without having to worry about betrayal from my family. It's incredible how making brave choices may completely change your life. I didn't immediately start making a ton of money from the new business. Before I started to witness the results of my labors, a whole year passed. However, it was immediately apparent that this endeavor was headed for more success than my prior company. At last, I experienced true joy once more. Surrounded by those I have chosen to spend time with. My new family, which consists of friends and co-workers who have stood with me no matter what. When I left my previous company, I left my biological family behind as well. It seemed to me that they had vanished. I started to feel unfamiliar with my mother, brother, uncle, and aunt. They saw me suffer and strive. But not a single one of them made contact. They seemed to have vanished from my life, as simple as that. The business we used to do together was also affected by this distance. Any interest or knowledge on its growth or well-being was totally shut off by me. It was a fresh start, not just from the individuals who had wronged me, but also from a history that no longer matched my goals and aspirations. It was really shocking to find my brother's resume among those selected for a senior role at my new firm. He was basically a co-owner of what was formerly our family business, so it was confusing to imagine that he would be seeking for work elsewhere. There were many ironies in the scenario, and I had a lot of questions. Why would he require a second job? What had transpired since my departure? I made up my mind to interview him myself. I had to know what the situation had been that had brought him here. The day of the interview finally came, and it was shocking to see my brother enter my office. He appeared to have suffered much from the year's stress. He appeared to be much older than he actually was. Our paths have parted in the little period since. He reacted with utter horror as soon as he saw me. He made an effort to remain calm in spite of the shock, which spoke a lot about the intricacy of emotions and maybe the struggles he had been going through. It was obvious that this interview would involve more than simply a potential job offer. It was an opportunity for insights, for comprehending what had happened during our time apart, and perhaps for resolution or a fresh start. I was forced to interview my brother for a position at my new employer, which put me in a pretty unpleasant situation. During the interview, I made an effort to act normally, but I was actually having trouble. It was difficult because I kept thinking about all the horrible things he had done to me in the past. It was similar to watching an unpausable movie. Then, as we were finishing up, I ended up telling him something he had previously told me. He talked about how he might not be the greatest candidate for this specific position, and that he might want to look for something a little less ostentatious. He became really irate immediately, so he must have recalled me saying that. He began by accusing me of being extremely unjust and of allowing my emotions to cloud my judgment. He was rather agitated and said a lot of things about how I was making a terrible mistake. I told them they could leave if they didn't like the way things were going. And you know what? In fact, he went. It wasn't until my phone went wild later that I gave it any thought. It seemed as though my whole family messaged me at once to chastise me for not hiring my brother. He is far more talented than I will ever be, they were saying, and I made a mistake by not hiring him. Because I didn't think my brother was a good match for the position in my firm. It seemed like everyone was against me. Dealing with all of those texts that kept rolling in was a lot. Thus, another turn of events occurred. My entire family began contacting me, requesting that I give my brother another opportunity at the job and even assist them with their business-related problems. Usually, I simply brush it off and go on. However, my wife then made a comment that made me stop and consider. She brought up the fact that my brother had his own family, including his wife and children, to look after. That caused me to pause and consider whether I should adopt a new perspective. Here's the thing, though. My brother doesn't seem like he has the necessary abilities or disposition to work for my organization. It goes beyond what has already transpired. Even so, it's difficult to forget. The question is whether he can do well in this position. I suppose you could say that I'm concerned that my emotions are influencing my choice. Can you blame me, though, given everything that transpired? It seems like a difficult situation to be in. To further complicate this entire problem, I was contacted by an old buddy from my childhood who knew my brother and me rather well. After I left, he briefly worked for the family business, but he quit soon after. Since I left, he told me everything that had been going on there. He told me, someone inside, offered me a lot of food for thought. My eyes were truly awakened to what had been going on at the firm ever since I left after speaking with that old buddy. He claims that my brother, our uncle, and our father just began to relax. They appear to believe that they won't have to do any work since the business would take care of itself. They seem to have forgotten that a company requires people to run it and make choices, not merely observe. I can't get the feeling that they didn't value the effort I was making while I was there. They continued to slack off, which makes me question how they were able to earn their business degrees in the first place. That mindset quickly diffused across the organization. Why should staff be motivated or interested when those at the top aren't? As a result, the workers inevitably began to show less and less interest in their jobs. Therefore, it should come as no surprise that the business started to struggle. Things will inevitably deteriorate if no one makes an effort to preserve or even enhance them, and that's precisely what took place. The business began to lose money. It's evident that negligence has caused it to deteriorate, which is rather disheartening to witness, particularly because I once put a lot of effort into the company. The company's status deteriorated further. It appears that in addition to my brother and the others not working hard, the firm was squandering any money it did produce on ostentatious items like costly automobiles. They don't even seem to be thinking about selling those to support the business. My pal had a valid argument. It quotes, not only that the company is struggling, the way it's being operated is more important. That kind of leadership would be disastrous for any business. I'm considering buying the firm because of this whole situation. Consider that, assuming control of it. But making sure the transaction doesn't include those fools, as I've grown to think of them. If I want to make a change, I need a fresh start. I've suspended all communication with them in the meanwhile. In order to get some peaceful time to organize my thoughts and decide what to do next, I blocked them. I don't need their incessant messaging to divert my attention or impair my judgment. This is a huge choice. That quote, the most recent revision then. I have a lot on my plate as I try to sort through everything and think of a move that can be really hazardous or highly sensible. One thing is certain though, if I proceed it will be on my terms, without having the dead weight to pull it down once more. It must have been a brave move to set up that encounter, indicating a possible turning moment. It was essential to establish your conditions up front, particularly that they would not be involved in the company's future. It's interesting, though not totally surprising, that when money was brought up, they showed that they were willing to back off. It gives you a great deal of insight into their goals and may even validate some of your hypotheses about their driving forces. Given that it wasn't a fortune, their enthusiasm to accept the offer actually shows how little they appear to care about the business's actual potential. It seems as though they saw the business more as a tool to achieve immediate financial success than as a worthwhile enterprise with room to grow that might have been fostered and expanded over time. For you, their response must have been a mix of satisfaction and disappointment. You must have felt satisfied that your evaluation of their dedication and vision, or lack thereof, was correct. And you must have been disappointed that the company, which could have meant so much more under different leadership, was quickly abandoned. There are opportunities as well as challenges in moving forward with the business that you are in charge of. It's an opportunity to start again and steer the company in the direction of success with a vision that values the company and the people it serves. Insights on your own strengths, resiliency, and the values you wish to instill in the organization may also come from this trip. Culture. It's a big step, but it also creates the opportunity to change the company to reflect your dedication, foresight, and diligence. Regaining my business was like winning a marathon that I was only aware I was running until the very final mile. For a little minute, picture yourself in a treehouse, a unique space that you constructed yourself and furnished with all of your favorite items. When your cousins eventually take over, they don't really care about it like you did, and instead of maintaining it cool and wonderful, they kind of let it fall apart. That is what transpired with my business. Although my family owned it, they didn't actually maintain it. They assumed it would remain fantastic on its own, but naturally it didn't. I seized the opportunity to regain my home or business. I hooked up with my friend who kept me informed on the company's status and the most recent family turmoil. Now that we are co-owners, we are prepared to tidy up and restore the magic after a long voyage. It wasn't simple to buy the corporation back. Imagine attempting to work out the rules of a board game while everyone else is attempting to manipulate them to their benefit. Dealing with my family seemed like that. There were several eye rolls and muttered remarks, similar like having to share your controller for a video game with a sibling who then acts like they're being polite. However, here we are. It's rather strange to watch my family splurging on various unnecessary items now that I have the business back. Like someone who wins a lifetime supply of inflatable pool toys on a shopping spree. However, they lack even a swimming pool. Additionally, they expelled me previously claiming that I wasn't fulfilling my responsibilities. Now, who is in possession of the kingdom's keys. It's an odd turn of events, but I don't harbour resentment. With my companion by my side, I'm just here and eager to get started and start working on restoring the company's glory. I'm all for that, even if it will be an immense cleanup mission. Here are the most popular remarks prior to the upgrade. Now, only God can save them. NTA. You don't need anyone's opinion on this matter, in my opinion. Your brother is a self-centered individual, and it's perfectly acceptable to deny him employment based alone on his prior mistreatment of you. Do you OP NTA? Please. To be honest though, you ought to have investigated suing your family at that very moment. In any case, you're not the a-hole in this scenario, in my opinion. The second story. I am 16 years old and my best friend Sarah is 16 as well. Since we were about 2 years old, we have essentially been inseparable, meaning that we have spent 14 years going through everything together. We have attended the same classes throughout our academic careers, sharing both the good and the bad. At school, Sarah is somewhat of a celebrity. Every guy appears to be infatuated with her. They never stop talking about her appearance, particularly her figure, which bothered us a little since, let's face it, it's strange and unsettling to concentrate on that. However, if we're simply discussing the facts, many people do seem to like Sarah's magazine cover appearance. She strikes a balance between having curves where society appears to demand them and being fit. Me? Well, that's the most attention I've ever received. It hasn't always worked out well for me because I'm more of the background person. At one time, dealing with bullies became so difficult that I had to transfer schools. Despite the fact that we are quite similar and nearly identical in every other aspect, it's strange how different our experiences have been. But in the middle of everything else that has been happening, our relationship has remained steadfast and genuine. I had a really difficult year last year, especially since I was constantly made fun of for being the obese buddy in my group. My best friend Sarah was well aware of it, yet occasionally she would say things that were incredibly inconvenient. Despite the fact that she was obviously far from obese, she would talk about how she felt so fat that no one wanted to be around her. I found it really perplexing and distressing at the time when she even boasted about having anorexia. Since anorexia seemed to play a significant role in her self-perception, I took her statements at its value and assumed she was dealing with it. Following my transfer to a new school, my weight was one of the things that began to shift for me. I was able to shed almost 35 kilos. It is around 77 pounds. For comparison, I was 5 feet 8 and weighed around 198 pounds or 90 kilograms, and after dropping weight I was down to about 55 kilograms or 121 pounds. Sarah weighs about 143 pounds or 65 kilograms, yet she is 5 feet 8 inches tall, much like me. I must admit that I wasn't particularly proud of the manner I dropped the weight. It's difficult, and in retrospect, I wish things had turned out differently, but whatever. All I'm trying to do is keep going as best I can. After working hard for months and only communicating with Sarah via video chats and texting, her birthday finally arrived. She asked me to join her for a modest celebration with her immediate family the day before her large party. Sarah's mother was blown away by my weight loss when I got there. She reacted strongly when she saw me in a totally different light, since she was so accustomed to seeing me as heavier than Sarah. She continued praising me and mentioning how different I looked. Even Sarah's father joined in. It was a little too much for me, and to be honest, I felt really uncomfortable about it. I made an effort to divert the topic of my weight reduction, but it kept coming up. In contrast, Sarah was not enjoying herself at all. Throughout the day, she appeared to be in a lot of distress, and after I left, she wrote me a text that really got to me. She accused me of being indifferent to her anorexia and called me a selfish jerk for ruining her birthday. The problem is that I never once mentioned how much weight I had lost. The last thing I wanted was to embarrass her or take away the attention, so I tried my best to shift the topic whenever it came up. It quotes difficult, since I believe Sarah's response may have been more motivated by her emotions than by the facts. She appears to be having trouble adjusting to the fact that the roles have somewhat flipped, with me now receiving all of the attention for my beauty, which was once her thing. I never wanted to give her any resentment or jealousy, so it's a difficult position. All I wanted was to improve my self-esteem. Let's move on to the top remarks, but I just wanted to let you know, OP, that the only time I was ever fit was when I was unable to eat due to the death of a loved one. I was at my most emotionally unwell, and I still can't believe how many compliments I get. Therefore, simply remember that folks like this could not be beneficial for your current situation. It doesn't sound like Sarah is a true friend. I would block her and let that unhealthy relationship go. Additionally, I hope that you are working with someone who is supporting your health. This is a sad scenario, NTA. Is Sarah's family so preoccupied with the child's weight? Just take care of yourself, please. NTA seems to have enjoyed having a fat pal to boost her self-esteem. It quote, Ironic that she doesn't mind you not getting attention, but now it's the other way around. The individuals who are making a big deal out of it are not at blame. It's all your responsibility. Furthermore, it seems like her parents are likely quite judgmental of her weight as she grows older, which is terrible. The third story. I take it that I have the sister. Once upon a time, we were fairly close. Even shared the same social circle and all. She was also quite close to my best buddy at the time. But when I was around 16, things started to go south. This is what took place. Somehow, the guy my best friend started dating ended up preferring me instead. I was completely unaware of it. However, my friend suddenly became rather rude to me. She began to really bully me. I had to change schools barely 2 months into the school year because things got so bad. Why? Because she revealed some really personal information about me to everyone. Things no one should discuss, similar to how I battled social anxiety and an eating issue. I experienced several really embarrassing situations at school, such as on the first day and during a significant school function, since it was so horrible. My sister and I don't really communicate anymore because it was such a difficult period. Since all that transpired, our relationship has just not been the same. Things became much more acute for me when the bullying began, since the man and my old closest buddy had revealed my secrets. You know, I occasionally experienced severe anxiety attacks due to the stress of all this turmoil. Since she was meant to be my best friend and not keep it between us, my so-called best friend was aware of these private details. Now she was telling everyone about my sister. In spite of all she did to me, she chose to remain friends with this girl. My sister didn't support me when I eventually worked up the nerve to tell her how deeply this affected me. For simply implying that she shouldn't be friends with someone who mistreated me, she labeled me a controlling brat. That's when it really got to me. I felt as though I had lost both my sister and a friend. Despite our parents' attempts to intervene and advise her to avoid this girl, my sister was unyielding. No matter what, she felt she had the right to select her own pals. For a few more years, they remained friends. My sister would even take her to locations where she knew I would be allowing her to bring her friends, despite all the fuss. It seemed like too much had been done by the time their friendship ended. All of these experiences had caused a significant alteration in my connection with my sister. A nightmare, all that trash. To be honest, the bullying wasn't the only thing that happened. For a long time, it left me quite damaged, and I became very angry with my sister for putting me through all of that. A few years ago, she made an effort to apologize, but I wasn't prepared to listen to her or even accept it. Now fast forward to the present. I'm preparing to tie the knot. Early on, I was quite clear with my parents that my sister would not be invited to the wedding. My brothers alerted me to the fact that my parents appeared to be considering mentioning my sister during their wedding speeches. I had previously attempted to discuss this with my parents, but they were uninterested. They said that since almost everyone is aware that I had a sister, they couldn't just disregard her presence. I told them the truth. Yes, people are aware that I have a sister, but they are also aware that we no longer communicate. I told my parents up front that I didn't want them to mention her during my wedding. For me, today is meant to be joyful, and I didn't want anything to remind me of those unpleasant times. They accused me of being unjust, particularly when she tried to apologize, but I interrupted her. Our relationship isn't the best right now. They believe me to be unjust. Am I the jerk? Let's move on to the top remarks. Perhaps your parents shouldn't go either if they can't celebrate your day without bringing up your estranged sister. The best man and maid of honor usually make the toast, so your parents don't have to deliver a speech because your wedding isn't about them or her, or about their ambitions of forcing a reconciliation. In actuality, neither the bride and groom's parents made a toast or a speech at any of the weddings I attended. However, I am not an authority on these matters. I'm not sure why your sister would ever be mentioned in a speech toast at your wedding. Anyway, congratulations on your most recent accomplishment together. Enjoy your TOS connection, etc. To avoid any possible drama, if I were you, I would simply forbid your parents from giving a speech about you. You don't want them to cause you any suffering or trouble. Even though it would shatter your heart more than theirs, Tell them that it's not about her on your one special day and that they have no right to speak if they can't respect that dot. However, they would just be harming you for their own gain.